Well, good morning, everybody, and a belated Happy New Year. Can't help feeling a slight sense of déjà vu standing here, because it was in this very room on the 3rd of June 2024 when I decided that I would come out of political retirement and come back and get involved as leader of reform by the good grace of Richard Tice, and what an 18 months it has been. We managed in that election to win a handful of seats and get over 4 million votes, but have made pretty remarkable, indeed some would say historic, progress since that moment. And we've now led the opinion polls for nearly 200 polls in a row with an average of around about 9 or 10%. So it's been an amazing 18 months. Now, of course, current affairs and politics never stop. And with the certain man in the American presidency, it's been a pretty busy news period. But today, I want to take the opportunity to remind everybody that 4 months today, on the 7th of May, we will see the single most significant set of electoral tests in this country between now and the general election. And my time, my effort, my focus, my energy, my drive, right at the moment, is entirely on getting this party ready to fight those elections with the right candidates and the right leadership where it's needed. The Welsh elections have been very much talked about already, and after 26 years of Labour controlling Wales, given that it has the worst NHS, the worst education, we're about to see in the traditional homelands in the valleys, the Labour Party getting pretty much wiped out in those elections. And I'll be doing events in Wales over the course of the next couple of weeks. And it really does look like a two-horse race between us and Plaid. In Scotland, the party has made just the most astonishing progress. I mean, I have to say, it surprised even me. Just look at the sets of by-elections that take place every couple of weeks, and you'll see consistently since July 24 our numbers improving, and in the one by-election there's been for the Scottish Parliament, we scored in the high 20%. I will be doing a press conference in Edinburgh next Thursday where I will announce the leader of Reform UK Scotland, and we look again quite possibly to those elections being a straight two-horse race between us and the SNP, although admittedly, right at the moment, the SNP are quite some way ahead. Of course, we have the English elections. Now, we've got a handful of county council elections that were cancelled last year that are supposed to take place this year, along with a whole new series of mayoral contests and thousands of council seats, many in the West Midlands, many in the North East. In fact, in total, if all the elections go ahead, we're going to need to field over 5,000 candidates on May the 7th this year. But as you know, the government have opened the door for the cancellation of elections in 63 separate areas, and already in East and West Sussex, the ruling Conservative leaders of those two respective county councils have already requested that the elections be cancelled for a second year in a row. I have likened this to a banana republic, and I don't pull back in any way from that statement. But regardless of what gets cancelled, this is still a very major set of elections taking place on May the 7th, and it may well decide who the Prime Minister is. It may well decide who the leader of the Conservative Party is, and it will make a material difference to my strength or otherwise as leader of this party too, and that's pretty much unavoidable. So the stakes are very, very high. Whoever comes out on top on May the 7th will be in a very strong position to win the next general election, which, as you all know, I do not believe will last until 2029. There are one or two commentators that will tell you that the economic markers are looking better, that inflation is softening, that interest rates are on the way down. Well, if you want to take those as measures of the economy in good shape you can, I actually take those measures to show just how weak the British economy is. And certainly, once you get outside of London, it's difficult to escape the feeling that we are literally on the edge of a very, very major business contraction amongst the private sector, certainly with small and medium-sized enterprises, and that unemployment may well be significantly higher this time next year. So I still believe that the ultimate power of the bond markets will bring this government to heel, and that we will get an election earlier. But there's one set of elections that I want to talk to you about today, and I know there'll be questions, of course, from the media on a whole range of other subjects. But there's one set of elections that are being pretty much ignored, and that is the fact that all 32 London boroughs are up for election on May the 7th, and they will not be cancelled. Now, traditionally, it would be fair to say that parties that I led in the past had not done particularly well in the capital. But that is changing, and changing very, very quickly. We view these elections as being important, not just of themselves. We view these elections as being a really very major electoral opportunity to us in several of those boroughs, which we believe we can win outright. But we also believe that it's a precursor to the election of the Mayor of London. Now, Sadiq Khan has announced he will run for the fourth consecutive time, there being no term limits. And of course, not everything that's gone wrong in London is Sadiq's fault. The flight of high taxpayers, the imposition of VAT on high-end goods, where those that used to spend fortunes in London now go to Paris, go to Milan. But many of the things that have gone wrong in London are clearly the fault of Sadiq Khan and the operation, frankly, of the Metropolitan Police and what their priorities are. London is now in the grip of a crime wave run by foreign criminal gangs, many of whom have come to this country illegally and frankly should not be here. And we are seeing a flight from London, particularly of people who've got children. They are scared about their kids going out at night, going out at weekends. They're particularly scared if their children are female. And this is something that has happened under Sadiq's watch, that, the rise in knife crime, and much else. Both of the last two opportunities, Khan could have been beaten. But the Conservatives chose Sean Bailey, who tried on his own to fight a very good campaign, but got no support from the Central Conservative Party whatsoever. They then came up with Susan Hall, who, for all of her good qualities, certainly had not become a household name and wasn't in a position to take on Khan. He could have been beaten on both of those occasions. Well, we view what will happen on May the 7th in London as the precursor to us taking on Khan in 2027, and we're going to fight fully with the intention of winning the London mayoralty. Internationally, the reputation of London is collapsing. This once admired, historic, astonishing and extraordinary place is now being talked about around the world in increasingly disparaging terms. The fish does rot from the head down. We need to get rid of Khan. We need a new mayor of London. And today's press conference is about launching our candidate to stand for mayor of London, but also the person that will be the face and the campaigning force around all 32 boroughs as we head in to those May the 7th elections. Laila Cunningham has already proven in her time with us as a party to be articulate, to be passionate, a mother, somebody who actually herself has had to effectively, in the absence of the police, act as a police officer herself in defence of her children. And she, from this moment on, will be the head of Reform UK London, our candidate for the mayor next year, but the face of our campaign as we fight a strong, vigorous campaign in all 32 London boroughs in the run-up to May the 7th. Be in no doubt, we are taking May the 7th very, very seriously. Be in no doubt, if we can succeed across the United Kingdom on May the 7th, we are certain we will then go on to win the next general election. Let me introduce and welcome to the stage Laila Cunningham.
Good morning. As Nigel has said, today we are announcing that I'm standing to be the next Mayor of London. Now, I know that we're still 2.5 years away, but the election on May 7th is the first step. It's the first step to reclaiming our city. Now, these local elections, I tell everyone, will be a referendum on Sadiq Khan, on Labour's broken London. It's Londoners' chance to vote out every councillor who's propped him up and stayed silent while he's let our city down. From now until May, I will be spearheading our campaign, touring every borough, because for the first time in years, Londoners finally have a real alternative: reform. And unlike Labour or Tories, we won't defend a status quo that doesn't work for the voters. See, London is my home. It made me who I am. I was born and raised here. Discovered my passion for basketball here, in the courts, from Croydon to Brixton to Newham. I played in the London Youth Games, some of the best times of my life, and that's where I learned the importance of team spirit. I became a senior Crown prosecutor here, and I'm raising my 7 children here. And that's 7 reasons why I want to do this. I love this city with all my heart, but unlike some in this room, I'm not blind to what it's become. London, one of the greatest cities on earth, is no longer safe. And that didn't happen by accident. That happened on Sadiq Khan's watch. Let's just go through some stats. Knife crime in London is up 68% since 2016. Robbery is up by more than 50% during that same period. More than 100 phones are stolen every single year, and that's just those we know about. We are living, ladies and gentlemen, through a rape epidemic. You see, crime for me is not theoretical, like some of the journalists who say I'm scaremonging. My family has experienced it many times. In fact, one time, my kids were targeted by gangs in balaclavas, who people say don't exist. Day after day, near us, in broad daylight. We were all terrified. I turned to the police, naturally. I was told there were not enough resources. So I gathered the evidence myself. In fact, I just had a baby then. I put him in the carrier. I followed the gangs. I took photos, because they were all in balaclavas. Their shoes were very distinct. I protected my family when the state couldn't. The press called me vigilante mum, but I should never have been put in that position. There should have been backup, but there wasn't. There should have been leadership that cared, but there wasn't. And I had to risk my life, my baby's life, my family's life to protect my family. Enough. I speak to so many women in this city who don't feel safe. Why would they? There's no police, and hardly any rape offences are prosecuted. I speak to women who've been raped who have been told by the police, I'm sorry, there's not enough evidence. And we all know rape happens when no one sees. I speak to parents, like myself, who panic every time their child doesn't pick up the phone. I think, has he been stabbed? Has he got into a fight? Has my daughter been sexually harassed? And I do see masked gangs roam our streets. I saw it as a criminal prosecutor in the areas I went to, and I see it in my area. And they carry knives and behave as no one will stop them. And most of the time, sadly, in this city, no one does. See, Londoners like me have lost faith in the law. The social contract and the state has failed in its first duty to keep us safe. This is the London that Sadiq Khan has created. A city where criminals operate freely, where victims are sacrificed, ignored. People are scared. And Khan thinks it's enough to tweet platitudes, random stats. Because let's face it, Khan never accepts responsibility. No, he attacks anyone who says London's dangerous. He calls them far right, racist. He ludicrously says that criticism of his record is because he's Muslim, and we are all Islamophobic. Frankly, it's an insult to victims and to Londoners. Londoners are scared because most of us, let's face it, have been victims of crime or know someone who has. And we're scared because London is more dangerous. Just look at what happened at Edgware Road this week. 3 young men stabbed. This is life now in London. It's not even surprising. This is what families fear every day for their sons when they leave their house. I've got 3 teenage boys. It's what I fear. A city where criminals just operate brazenly. Why not? There's no visible policing. Yet he keeps telling us his fight against crime is working. Let's have a recap of his greatest hits, shall we, in his so-called fight against crime. Police stations and public counters closed. Visible policing cut. Stop and search halved. And as violent crime rose, guess what he did? He chose to create specialist Met police squads to monitor hate speech. Officers diverted and tasked with policing language. Honestly, you couldn't make it up. And thanks to Khan, a massive vacuum on our streets, power vacuum, that was filled by criminals. And listen, crime doesn't stop with the victim. It's corrosive. It rips through the economy. Shops close. High streets die. I speak to people who don't want to invest here. Investment goes elsewhere because who the hell wants to build a future in a city where the police just don't show up? And the consistent message from Khan is, it's not my problem. It's not my fault. He treats City Hall like his own kingdom, waving through pet projects or jetting off to faraway lands on our expense. He rewards cronies with 6-figure salaries while ordinary Londoners can't pay their bills. But Londoners need to know that the state of law and order in our city is his fault. He is the London Police and Crime Commissioner. He appoints the Met Commissioner. He sets the priorities, the direction. He signs off on the budget. He is in charge. So Londoners, I have a different message. Safety for Londoners is the first duty of any mayor, and it will be my first duty as Mayor of London. And that means visible policing. Zero tolerance for crime. Real consequences. There'll be a new sheriff in town, and I'll be launching an all-out war on crime. I will set clear, high-level priorities for the Met to focus on tackling knife crime, drugs, robbery, shoplifting, rape. And I will task the Met Police with targeting, hunting, and prosecuting rape gangs in London. There will be nowhere for them to hide. And as Mayor, I will ensure there is a serious reckoning for those who have failed those victims and those who have failed this city. Speaking of the latter, TfL. Time and time again, London has been held to ransom because the Mayor won't stand up to his union paymasters. He serves them before he serves us. And under me, that ends. And if it means automating the trains, then that's exactly what I'll do, train by train. Every part of life in London is getting more expensive. And still, he keeps punishing people for driving to work. ULEZ isn't about quality of air or air quality, it's about cash and control. He knew it would hit working Londoners the hardest. He just didn't care. He just wanted to be some kind of international eco-warrior. Working people have been fined, tracked, and taxed simply for driving to work. I'm speaking to parents simply for taking their children to school, simply for caring for elderly relatives. Carers, tradesmen, small business owners have been treated like the problem, while violent offenders walk the streets. Not only walk the streets, own the streets. Under my watch, that will stop. I will end the war on motorists. And to all you Londoners stuck in traffic, I will get London moving again. And I want to say something about the city I love, about London itself. When I was growing up, London was the place to live, the place to work, the place to build a life. People envied those that lived here. Now they pity us. They say, ooh, London's a bit too dangerous for me. People were proud to say they were Londoners. We said it with warmth, with belonging. Sadly, today I speak to so many people who are leaving. So many families who are moving out because they fear for their kids, because their kids have repeatedly been mugged, targeted. To businesses who are shutting down because they can't afford the shoplifting. Investors who are going elsewhere. Sadly, our young people that I speak to no longer dream of moving to London. They're scared of it. They see young men are stabbed for their watches or jackets in broad daylight. That's not normal, but we're told to accept it. But for me, it will never, ever be acceptable. Now imagine the reverse. Imagine London safe again. Imagine pride again. Imagine the capital city of the United Kingdom, restored to its former glory, strong, confident, prosperous, and secure. This is the London I believe in, and that is the London I will fight for. A London where our flag will be flown proudly across this city as a symbol of unity, belonging, and as a symbol of our British pride. This city made me who I am. And as mayor, I will fight for it, for my children, for yours, for us. I will fight as hard as I can for the London that it should be. A united London. No more splitting us in boxes, black, white, gay, straight. No, we are all Londoners under one box. Because all they did was divide and conquer. That's going to stop. Over the next 2 years, I will put together the most serious, detailed plan for London that any party has produced. And I won't do it from behind a desk. I will go borough to borough, estate to estate, high street to high street, listening to Londoners. And unlike Labour, I won't be lecturing them. I want to hear from shopkeepers, mums on the school run, black cab drivers. One of my first legal jobs was representing black cab drivers, nurses, small business owners, young people like my children who feel that they've been pushed out of their own city. I will speak to everyone because this plan will not be written by me. It will be written for and by the people who actually live here, work here, raise their families here. And they deserve a city that finally works for them and not the politicians. Because I'll end with this, this isn't about political allegiance anymore. It's about the future of our city. And I don't say this lightly, it's about the survival of our city. Living in London the way we want to live. It's about restoring what makes London worth living in. Ask yourself, is that still here? It's not about whether you voted Tory or Labour. To be fair, most Londoners have given up on Tories a long time ago. They're not even part of the conversation. But the mayoral election will be a binary choice. Khan v. Cunningham. And listen, Khan knows who I am. I've confronted him before on his record. He tried to ignore me once, but my message to him, he can't ignore me anymore. The choice of Khan v. Cunningham is a choice that you will make that will decide the future of London, the future of the best city in the world. So I tell you this, vote for the freedom that safety brings. Vote for reform. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and you can see the passion there. And worth reminding everybody that Laila has given up a very successful, well-paid job to do this full time. And you'll no doubt hear a little bit more about her work with the Crown Prosecution Service as time goes on. I think there are two quick messages that come for me out of it. Number one, don't mess with a vigilante mum. And number two, for those who don't think this can actually happen, throughout the 1980s and 1990s, I worked for American companies, New York-based, Chicago-based, and I do remember, going to New York as a young businessman, and you wouldn't dare leave a bar or restaurant until you saw the car ready on the side of the road, and you ran across as quickly as you could, because New York had become the most dangerous city in America. And 8 years later, after 2 terms of Rudy Giuliani, New York had become one of the safest cities in America. All done by one man, one man's drive and determination, and the NYPD cooperating, or where they didn't, being sacked, and the right people with the right priorities coming in. As I say, some will think, well, these elections are a long way away. But the point is, every person in London has a vote on May the 7th. And we intend to try and make it a referendum on the direction that the whole capital is going in. Right, we have a lot of questions. I will take the questions, but anything to do with Laila or London, she will come to the microphone. Let's begin with Nick Eardley from the BBC.
Can I ask you about President Trump's recent comments about Greenland? Sorry.
Yes.
Morning, Mr. Farage. Can I ask you first about Donald Trump's recent comments about Greenland? He's talked about acquiring the island, including potentially using the military. Do you agree with the Prime Minister that the decision for the future of Greenland should be for the people who live there and for the Danes? And as a second question on international affairs, if I may, do you think the UK would be right to send boots to the ground in Ukraine in the event of a peace deal? I'll ask a London question as well.
Oh, well, here we go.
Get my money's worth. Ms. Cunningham, Sadiq Khan has said that he still thinks London is the greatest city in the world. Is he right?
Yeah, that's what I said. It is the greatest city in the world, but I'm not blind to what it's become. You speak to people on the streets, they don't feel safe. Anyone who says otherwise hasn't walked the streets or doesn't live in it.
Yeah, I mean, if Sadiq Khan thinks that London today is the greatest city in the world, he is deluded. And he wants to get out more and meet people. And you know, it's very interesting. One of the reasons, I mean, the exodus of people that's gone, and the non-doms, the wealthy, but the 30-something entrepreneurs and aspirationists, when you ask people in Dubai, in Milano, places like that, when you ask them, would you come back to the UK? Well, it's not just about tax. It's actually about, I will only come back if this is a safe city for me and my family to live in. And I honestly believe that Khan, the Labour government, the Conservative opposition, they've lost sight of this. They've genuinely lost sight of just how negative the perception is of London. And whether it's people going abroad or people moving out to other parts of the home counties and accepting a long, expensive commute to work, this issue is right at the very heart of it. On the other issues, boots on the ground. With kit. What boots? What kit? I mean, we might be able to go for 6 or 8 weeks, but if you're talking about a modern-day reincarnation of the British Army of the Rhine, forget it. We are in no position to do it. And despite all the promises that have been made on defence spending, absolutely none of them have happened so far, and there's no particular indication that they will. We are not in a place to do it. I would also add, I thought the press conference in Paris yesterday was interesting. There were 2 press conferences going on. One was the Americans saying we're trying like crazy to get a peace deal. The president's determined to do it. We are, one is envoy, the other is son-in-law. At the same time, that the European leaders, or those that actually showed up, were talking about what would happen after peace. It was like 2 simultaneous press conferences going on. It showed the sheer impotence, frankly, of the European Union itself. Only the British and French have agreed to do anything. The German Chancellor said he might chuck a few troops in Poland, but none in Ukraine itself. Giorgia Meloni was missing. So I thought that was very interesting. I also thought it was quite noteworthy to see the Prime Minister in action, speaking out to the press, to the cameras, incapable of speaking for as long as 2 seconds without looking at his notes. And I increasingly feel with this Prime Minister, he's just given notes, he goes out, he reads them. I'm not even sure he knows what he's saying anymore. We told that at the special cabinet meeting yesterday, he was there to inspire the troops, to get them kicked off for 2026. And he did it by reading out pre-prepared statements. And I think, this is a man politically who is drowning. Greenland. OK. I agree with the Prime Minister. This should be for the people of Greenland and Denmark to decide. Of course I do. Of course, Prime Minister, I believe in national self-determination. And the sooner you apply it to the badly treated Chagosian community, the better things will be. What I will say is this. There are some genuine security concerns around Greenland. And that becomes ever more relevant with a retraction of the ice caps as we head towards the North Pole. That there is a strong feeling in British intelligence circles, and many in NATO, that there needs to be a significant NATO base located directly on the north of Greenland. At the moment, it would appear that is something Greenland is not particularly keen to do. As you know, since 2009, Greenland has been moving further and further away from Danish control and is pretty close to establishing its own level of independence. And the fear is that they will fall prey to very large amounts of Chinese money and Chinese influence. So, as ever, with things that Trump says, they may sound outrageous, and in the case of potentially using force, they are, but there is point behind it. So there are genuine security concerns around Greenland, but no, of course, they are the people that must decide. Thank you. Moving on to Mari Aurora from Sky News.
Thank you, Mari Aurora from Sky News. I'll begin with you, Laila, on London. How exactly do you plan to achieve this reduction in crime? Could you give us a bit more detail? You talked about stop and search, for instance. Is that something that you'd like to expand more in London, for instance? And for yourself, Mr. Farage, if Trump were to invade Greenland, let's just hypothetically ask that question, would you stand up to Donald Trump? Or would you see that as the end of NATO? And have you spoken to Donald Trump in the past few days on their actions in Venezuela?
No, I haven't spoken to Donald Trump. He's been rather busy, actually. Ever since 2016, the narrative has been that Trump wants to destroy NATO. But actually, whenever I talk to Trump since 2016 about NATO, he's always said, no, that's not right. I want to strengthen NATO. And ask yourself a question. Has Trump strengthened or weakened NATO? Well, you know, even the Secretary General, Stoltenberg, as he was of NATO, said that Donald Trump had led, his words had led to a significant increase in defense spending from most NATO members. So in many ways, he has strengthened NATO. However, if he was to do this using military force, that probably would be the end of NATO, which is why he won't do it, in my opinion. And would I stand up to him? Now, the great thing with being friends with people is friends don't always agree with everything that the other one says. Friends have the right to disagree with each other as well, and of course I would. Laila, do you want to take the do you want to come to the microphone?
Yeah, sure.
Because there isn't a mic there.
So, I'll do what Sadiq Khan never did, is that I will prioritise safety. I'll rewrite the police and crime plan, which is what he does, which sets the directions, sets the priorities, and I'll have new marching orders to the Met. You tackle violent crime. You tackle crime that matters. You root out grooming gangs. You stop knife crime. I want to see visible policing in hotspots where women are coming out of nightclubs and targeted. Repeat offenders will be banned from areas. I'll restore visible policing in our streets, in our high streets, in our parks. I'll reopen public counters, police stations, and I will introduce automatic stop and search for masked thugs. Because the day of masked thugs roaming our streets and operating under a cloak of anonymity will be over. I'll push through criminal behaviour orders. For those of you that don't know, criminal behaviour orders ban people from areas, and that will be after one offence. Because I think we're all sick and tired of seeing the same repeat offenders be released from prison the next day. Because you commit one offence on our high street, you won't be back.
Thanks. Yeah, and as this develops, I know some people say, well, can we afford to do this? And the answer to which, of course, is, can we afford not to do it, given the state that we're in? OK, moving on, Olivia Utley, GB News.
You talk about the serious security concerns with Greenland, but you don't like the idea, of course, of Trump using military force.
Yeah.
Is your hope that Trump succeeds in buying Greenland from the Danish? And a question for Laila. Your plan is to make London safer. That obviously relies on there being more police officers. At the moment, the Met is really struggling to recruit and retain police officers. How will you turn that around?
Well, actually, it's not about recruitment. It's about priorities. We have 32,000 officers. I don't know where the hell they are. Why are they not on our streets? Why doesn't every high street not have someone patrolling? I go to Oxford Street, one of the highest areas of theft, shoplifting, knife crime. I don't see one police on the streets, do you? No. So that's what I do. I'm going to restore visible policing. In fact, this November, as crime has gone up, as we are all suffering, he has cut police from the royal parks. I spoke to my Safer Neighbourhood team, who consists of 2, by the way. 10 years ago, it consisted of 7. And they told me now they are tasked with policing the parks, as well as my ward. That's not acceptable. If a police officer is not on the beat and delivering, then that police officer's out. And that's the same for the commissioner.
Very good. Look, I've no idea what shape this will take. America, of course, historically has expanded by buying territory. They've been doing that since very, very early on. I suspect, well, I don't know, but I suspect we'll finish up with some kind of cooperation agreement, which will involve not just defence, and as I say, the need for a NATO base on the north of Greenland, and this is what people are worried about, but will also involve a deal around minerals. Unlike the types of people who've led both of the last 2 governments in this country, President Trump understands that oil, gas, copper, rare earth minerals are going to be absolutely vital for the world over the course of the next several decades. So I suspect there'll be, ultimately, some kind of economic agreement. Look, I don't know, but that's very much also how I hope it will go. Anna Miklikova from Times Radio.
Anna Mikhailova, Times Radio. Nigel Farage, you mentioned your concerns about Greenland falling prey to Chinese money and Chinese influence. Do you have a message for the Prime Minister ahead of his trip to Beijing this month? And Laila Cunningham, you said that you would like London restored to its former glory. When is that in your mind?
On day 1, I'll get that going.
No, as in, when was its former glory? What period?
When I was growing up. When I was growing up, I wasn't scared to walk down the street. I knew my local Bobby. In fact, when I was growing up, my local teacher lived next to me. Now she can't afford it. My local Bobby lived next to me. Now he can't afford it. I knew that if something got stolen, I could run to the local police station. I could phone the police and they'd come. I've had my husband's computer was stolen. He called the police. He said, I've got tracking on it. They said, sorry, we just don't have the resources to follow it. Everything stems from having a safe city. And right now, we do not have a safe city. And for me, a former glory will be a thriving city where young people say, I want to graduate from university, and there's opportunity there. Startups are opening, tech startups from all over the world. They want to set up shop in London because they know that London's the future. That's not what's happening now. In fact, City of London, we're number 20 in the world for listings. We used to be number 1. People are not setting up shop here, and with that, they're taking their jobs, their tax, and they're taking our pride.
Yeah, I mean, police stations were very much part of communities. And 80% have closed since 2010 in London. 80% have closed. So there is that feeling the police simply aren't there. And yeah, if your mobile phone is stolen and you've got a tracking device and you can see exactly which house it's gone to, in which street. I had an example in my family of a phone and it finished up in a street in High Wycombe. Well, you can bet that wasn't the only mobile phone that went to that address in High Wycombe that day. Perhaps there were 50, perhaps there were 200. And you say to the police, I've tracked it. We know where the stolen item is. Not interested in any way at all.
Can I just add to that? In fact, it's not even about that. So I was in Zara the other day, and I'm not going to name which one, and a lovely young girl comes up to me. She goes, oh my God, are you Laila from Reform? And she had to whisper because she's like, they can't know I'm from, I support you guys. She's never voted in her life, never been political. And she told me she was on a bus and she was being touched up by what she thinks was an Afghani man. And she called the police. The police turned up when she ended at the bus stop and they arrested him. The next morning, he was on that bus stop again. He was released. She saw him again another time on the bus. She was touched up again by a foreign man. She gets to the end of the bus stop. Her boyfriend and the police are waiting for her. And the boyfriend tells the man, "You touch my girlfriend again, you rat. And I'm gonna, I'll sort you out." You know what the police said? "If you talk to him like that again, we're gonna have to arrest you for racial, on a public order act." They went after him another time. And this is not made up. She was mugged for her phone with a knife, and they arrested a youth. He had 5 phones on him. That night, the police called her and said, "We're really sorry, we had to release him because he's a youth." She feels that she doesn't have any backup. No one's there to protect her. And it's for that reason that she'll be voting reform. And I can assure you a lot more others who've never been political have just had enough.
Yeah, and we saw that with the Mumsnet poll that came out over the weekend, that, a lot of women in that age who may have children are thinking that reform is needed. And I just think on this whole area of law and order, safety and crime, I just don't think Westminster gets it. I just think they get it. I'll be with Times Radio, of course, live at 12 o'clock today, which is much more worthwhile than sitting in the House of Commons being abused by a Prime Minister and having absolutely no chance to respond whatsoever. Look, I'm afraid I think that there are very, very serious questions to be asked about the relationship of this government, many senior current and ex-civil servants, with the Chinese Communist Party. And yeah, we can talk about Russia all you like, and we can talk about Russian attempts to influence elections and bribe people, and yeah, it's right, we should be concerned. But I'm actually far more concerned on a deep security level about the infiltration of the Chinese Communist Party right to the very top of the British government. And I think the finger is pointing very, very clearly at Labour. My advice to the Prime Minister would be, say to the Chinese, we only deal with people who are honourable. We only trust people who keep their word. And given that you've broken your word over Hong Kong, we're struggling to believe or trust anything that you say. But he won't say any of it. Andy Bell, 5 News. Is he here? No? Right. He's off. Don't invite him back. Shabab Khan from ITV News.
Shihab Khan, ITV News. I've got 2 questions, one for each of you. Laila, my question to you is you seem to be very critical of ULEZ and driving around London. If you were the Mayor of London, what would happen to the congestion charge and the ULEZ charge? And to you, Mr Farage, just before Christmas, ITV News did a report where they interviewed 5 of your former classmates, where for the first time during the broadcast interview, they outlined the allegations of anti-Semitism and racism that they say you are responsible for. Will you apologise to them? And if not, why do you find it so difficult to apologise to people who are clearly hurt by what they say you did?
I don't apologise for things that are complete made-up fantasies. And some of what I heard was just absolute nonsense by people with very obvious, if you looked, political motivation. Although, you can go on doing your stuff on things that happened in the 1970s, and we'll worry about May the 7th.
I'd scrap ULEZ because I don't think a war on motorists helps anyone. High streets are hollowed out. It's too expensive to drive to go shopping. And that's why people aren't going out. And I'd scrap ULEZ because I want a war on criminals, not a war on motorists.
I mean, the outer ULEZ was an absolute disgrace. Outer ULEZ, just an absolute disgrace. For people like me, driving in and out of Greater London on a regular basis, doesn't affect me. I've got a new car, I can afford it. But the pensioner on a fixed income, the nurse who lives outside of London because it's cheaper but drives into London to work, and they're the people that have been paying ULEZ. And you see from the air reports, a year into outer ULEZ, no significant change environmentally whatsoever. All about tax and control, and I'm afraid what this has done is to hit the poorest, and I think it's an absolute disgrace. Gary Gibbon, Channel 4 News.
You have to wait and find out.
Good answer.
Thank you. I was listening to your answers about Greenland, and I just wanted to ask you a slightly broader one, because people wonder what foreign policy would look like if you were to go into number 10. President Trump is calling time, isn't he, on the international rules-based system. Is that a good thing? Is it? Where are you on international law? What would foreign policy be like under you?
Well, international law, Gary, as you well know, is a creation that came about in the post-1945 settlement, following the horrors that had been committed by Nazi Germany, that sought this new rules-based order, that was doing its best to make sure that no Western nation ever, or any nation, but Western particularly, ever slipped into that kind of monstrosity again. So I completely understand why there was a European Convention on Human Rights, for argument's sake. I completely understand why, we have a UN Charter. I mean, all of this stuff I completely understand. But I'm afraid that the ever more politicization of whether it's the World Health Organization, whether it's courts like the ICJ, has frankly meant that many of us now regard these institutions as being hopelessly out of date, and much of what they say as being frankly illegitimate. And we are moving into a very new world of national self-interest, where countries will put their own national self-interest first. And that, by the way, will not be a bad thing, provided those countries are democratically run and have accountable leaderships. The danger, actually, is not the existence of nation states. The danger is when nation states are not democratic, when the leaders are not accountable. And it's very interesting. I can't think of a single example in history of two mature, functioning democracies going to war with each other. Not one single example can I think of. So look, the concepts of international law, outdated, frightfully popular in Islington and Hampstead, and amongst many members of this government, but now no longer, as they were intended originally, fit for purpose in 2026. Thank you. Christian Calgi from The Express.
Happy New Year, both. Laila, do you think it is incumbent on the Conservatives to stand aside in this forthcoming mayoral election to help you out, or do you relish the battle? And Nigel, on the Shamima Begum row that kicked off on New Year's Eve, do you think Keir Starmer or Lord Hermer would actually be willing to ignore the ECHR if they were to rule that she should return?
Good Lord, no. They believe in international law. It was very interesting, actually. Unprompted, Keir Starmer's second speech as Prime Minister in the House of Commons was on the ECHR. There was no particular current debate about it, other than what we were trying to promote and push. The Tories, as they'd been for all 14 years in government, were still very much in favour of the ECHR. And his second speech as Prime Minister at the dispatch box was basically my love and belief in the ECHR. So the answer is no, they will not.
In terms of the Conservatives, listen, they can do whatever they want. Nobody really cares. I mean, they can field whoever they want. I relish a battle. I don't think it's a fair game. If they want to field someone, they're more than welcome. They've tried it many times and they've lost many times. They don't take London seriously because they know they can never win in it. We're here to win it. I'm in it to win it. We're polling second in London. Someone told me to look at the bookies. I'm joint favourite with Khan without even announcing the bookies. And I'm here to put Khan on notice. His time's up. It's not his kingdom anymore.
Well, I promise you. And I promise you none of the money that's been put on Laila was put on by me. I absolutely promise you of that. After all, the Tories would do that sort of thing, wouldn't they? Give an inside information and bet on early elections. Right, cracking on. Daisy Eastlake from The Times.
Hello, good morning. You said what boots when you were talking about boots on the ground in Ukraine after a peace deal. Under Reform UK, would you commit to further defence spending to put boots on the ground, or would you just simply not do that? You don't think it's a good use of that kind of defence spending? And what would you spend on defence in total?
Well, there's no doubt that drone technology is the way forward. There is no doubt that we have been behind the curve as a country on this, both governments. I'm also pleased to say, with good intel I got at the weekend, that the MOD, that department, are actually now beginning to wake up to this. A bit more priority has been put into it. So things are not quite as desperate as they might have been if I'd answered that question perhaps a month or two ago. The British Army is just too small. Recruitment is terrifyingly bad. Our special forces are being destroyed. I mean, what ex-SAS soldier would now recommend their son join the SAS? They just simply wouldn't do it. The Legacy Act, the continued persecution of British soldiers from half a century ago, whilst those who committed terrorist offences are completely absolved of everything they did. Morale absolutely desperate, so we need a very, very big turnaround. I do actually think John Healey is one of the more capable of the cabinet ministers. Well, I mean, there aren't very many, but I think he's one of the more capable ones. But no, I think there needs to be a complete change of culture from top to bottom. And yes, money is part of it. Money is part of it. Increased defence spending is part of it. And we've made it clear. There was some confusion in your newspaper this morning from one of your columnists. And she seemed to think that we were the party of high welfare spending. And actually the press conferences that Lee and Zia and others have done, and what we've actually done is we've actually proposed the biggest cuts to welfare spending ever in the history of these islands. And so I believe we are going to have genuinely more money for defence. But there's a lot more work to be done, clearly, on all of that. Who have I got next? Lucy White, Bloomberg. You should have bought a packed lunch, some of you, shouldn't you, really?
It's a long list.
It's all right.
Thank you. Question for both of you, if that's all right. Nigel, we've heard reports over the last few days that the US is stepping up its presence at various military bases around the UK, potentially to intercept ships. Are you concerned that we are being dragged into a fight that the US is waging? And Laila, if I can ask you as well, how do you plan to fund the increase in bobbies on the beat that you've talked about today? And you spoke about your concerns that your local bobby or your local teacher can no longer afford to live beside you in London. Do you want to see house prices come down in the capital, or are you really hoping that wages can rise by that much?
Well, look. Can I just quickly say on these things that we did lay out last summer, our national spend that we would put into law and order and policing. And if you remember, we've got Colin Sutton, the most famous living detective in Britain, who's setting up our police and crime panel, and they're doing the work. And the policy that we announced, they will put a lot more meat on the bone over the course of the coming months and year, is the answer to that. And on housing, I want to say this before Laila answers very quickly, that in London we have to build up. We have very, very low density housing in London. A lot of that, of course, goes back to the mass building of suburbia in the 1930s and it being very desirable places to live. But my big concern right now, with national government particularly, is that we start to erode the very, very effective Abercrombie settlement of 1944 of the green belt around London. And if we start to erode into that seriously, then London just becomes an endless, sprawling mass. We need to build a lot more homes in London, but we need to start building homes up, as other comparable European cities do. Do you want to add to that, Laila?
Yeah, I mean, listen, as I said, I'll set new priorities. So it's not always a budgetary issue, it's a deployment issue. I want to know where every police officer is deployed and why they're deployed there. And I'll make it clear that policing tweets is over. Policing criminals is back. And then I'll start cutting City Hall waste. How many of Sadiq Khan's cronies are earning around £100,000? What are they showing for it? I think TfL bosses are up to 2 million. The biggest guy there's earning 600 grand. For what? Has Londoners seen an improvement in it? Why does his salary go up? But conditions for Londoners keeps going down. In terms of wages rising, yeah, I think wages will rise when you make it a safe city and businesses are opening up here. Successful businesses are not moving to Paris or elsewhere because they trust that, it's a safe city. And in terms of housing, I mean, I've said this before, We have a city where social housing is prioritising refugees over British people, over people that built this city, and that's got to stop. We have to recognise, we have councils that will not discriminate on the basis of where you're from. Well, I want to see them discriminate in the favour of British people. It's enough time that we have governments and councils that are actively deprioritising the people that built this country and built this city. And that's how I think more housing will come on the market.
With Maduro gone, an enemy of the West has gone. The biggest loser, apart from Mr. and Mrs. Maduro, is Vladimir Putin. He is the biggest loser out of this. You know, he doesn't have that many allies around the world. He doesn't have many bolt holes he could potentially go to, which he may well have to do within the space of the next couple of years, and another one has gone. And if US forces, US Air Force, are using British bases to attack the trade, the illicit trade between Russia and Venezuela, then I think that's a good thing and not a bad thing. Sam Merriman, Daily Mail.
Do you think that Met Commissioner Mark Rowley bears any responsibility for the crime wave in London? You've previously talked about a shake-up at the top of the civil service. Would the same be true of the Met Police if Reform wins the mayor election? And also for Mr Farage. Tommy Robinson said last night that he plans to sue you for libel. Do you have any response to that, please?
Goody gumdrops. I look forward to it enormously. Thank you.
My message will be clear. If you are not delivering for the for Londoners, then you're out. And I was really disappointed when Mark Rowley said there were no grooming gangs in London, and then turned around and said we're reviewing 9,000 cases. How the hell do you get 9,000 cases wrong? So, as it stands right now, I think he has to go, because on my watch, you don't get 9,000 grooming cases wrong. You get it right the first time. And if he's not delivering, he's got to go, and that's a message to everyone.
Yeah, but not before the West Midlands Police Commissioner goes, because he needs to go today. And well done, Nick Timothy, Conservative MP, Suffolk Conservative MP, who really has worked incredibly hard to expose all of this. It was monstrous that the impression was given that the Jewish Israeli fans would be violent, when the truth is there were serious threats of violence against them, and huge degrees of misinformation fed in by local elected politicians in the West Midlands with the assistance of one or two mosques who do not have good reputations. And I thought the performance yesterday in front of the Commons Committee was absolutely abject, so he needs to go first. Right, let's move on to Camilla Tominey of Daily T.
Morning. The Spectator poll of polls put Reform on 32% in October, now on 28%. What vote share do you need to win on May the 7th to turn around to the country and say you have got a mandate for national governance? And secondly, if I may, the Telegraph has just launched its Save Our Pubs campaign. How do you plan to campaign on this issue, which I would imagine is quite close to your heart?
I've saved many pubs over the years, don't worry about that. Yeah, look, but I've always taken the view that every pub's a parliament. That actually it's in pubs where you go in and you chat to people, whether you know them or it's at random, and you express an opinion, and someone says, maybe you thought of it this way, and you go, oh, that's interesting. You know, maybe I'm wrong. You know, and in pubs we discuss everything. From why is the England football manager German, to is the local vicar a Marxist? You know, I mean, these are the kinds of conversations and other more serious issues, like more serious, I suppose. But look, it's a tragedy what's happening to pubs. It's been going on for a very, very long time. I have to say, I listened to a Labour minister on the TV this morning about their new drink drive laws, saying, well, if you want to have a drink, don't drive. Yeah, but I mean, this is because we've got laws being designed by the Islington North London bicycling classes. You know, what about rural Britain? What about rural Britain? I mean, no one cares, of course. In fact, many in Labour seem to hate rural Britain. But this is the drink drive thing is absolutely ridiculous, wholly unnecessary. We've been where we've been since 1967. It's worked pretty effectively. If you actually look at road casualty figures, safety figures in this country, through whatever cause, we are now incredibly safe on our roads. Incredibly safe, much safer than France, way safer than Germany. And we've actually reached a level on accidents beneath which it's almost impossible to go, because there will always be human error of some kind. Just while we're on that subject, just because of the sheer inefficiencies of the way the British state now works, young people who want to pass their driving test will now have to wait 6 months between the theory and the actual test itself. And is it any wonder that Britain's young feel so put upon by older generations? Just another example to me. You look, so, I think we've dealt with all of that. On the polls, well, they're all up this week, as you know. So there you go. 3 polls this week, all up. 1 with us up 1, 1 with us up 2, 1 with us up 3. Look, we did reach a peak in the summer. Not surprising. That came in the aftermath of what happened on May the 1st. Yeah? It also happened because in August, when the Westminster classes were on the beaches of Saint-Tropez, we were working. And that was when I mentioned Colin Sutton a moment ago. I could have mentioned Vanessa Frake, the former Tough prison governor. We were very, very active in the month of August with our law and order campaign, and we were campaigning then into a vacuum. So maybe we went 1 or 2 points rather higher at that moment in time than we anticipated, but we begin the year strongly. We're doing this press conference today, and I think you can see we've got somebody here who's going to be a serious campaigner, and that'll lead all the way up to May the 7th and right on until the mayoral election. And there'll be more press conferences next week, more announcements coming. And, has Kemi had a better couple of weeks? Yes. Has she gained a bit of confidence at the ballot box? Yes. Good, and good for her, that's fine. But you can't get away from the Tories' record. It's all well and good standing up at the party conference. We're going to abolish stamp duty, hooray! But this from the party that quadrupled stamp duty in their 14 years in office. And how this bloke, Philp, or whatever his name is, I mean, to stand up and to say it was monstrous of the Prime Minister to praise this scumbag, the word he used, from Egypt, when it was the Conservative Party themselves under Boris Johnson that gave the man British nationality, El Fattah, in 2021, is beyond me. So, I would just say this about her, that even though she's horrible about me, I've got no ill will towards her of any kind. I've never been rude about her. But I just think they're a split party. No doubt 50 or 60 of their MPs would be far better suited in Ed Davies' Liberal Democrats. No, I really mean that. I'm not even joking for once. I mean that. And they can't get away from their record. They just cannot escape from their record. And I think what you'll see, I predict what you'll see on May the 7th is the Conservative Party will cease to be a national political party because they're going to get obliterated in Scotland. They will barely exist in Scotland after May the 7th, and I genuinely believe that. And they're probably not too far away from that situation in Wales as well. And I really think that your Bromleys, your Bexleys, your places like that in this campaign in London, places that have literally always been Conservative, I genuinely think we've got every chance of winning. Now, your last question is much harder to answer, and that's what percentage will we need? And I don't know. I mean, this Polanski bloke's appeared out of nowhere. Ambitious sort of chap, isn't he, really, with some of the things he's trying to do? I mean, clearly a lunatic. But, there's a market out there for heroin. There's a market out there for open borders. If this is what turns you on, then the Greens are clearly for you. And much as we've obsessed since the election about the changing nature of centre-right politics in Britain, I'm actually more fascinated by the changing shape of centre-left politics in Britain and by the growth of the Greens and by the fact that this sectarian vote which I very much predicted, a handful of years ago, this sectarian vote is just not going to go away. I wonder whether we'll see that sectarian vote in parts of East London. We've seen it before. In Tower Hamlets and elsewhere, we have seen it before. It's funny, the Tories are bumping along at 20%, but you do begin to wonder whether the Labour vote isn't just disappearing down to a base somewhere in the low teens or something like that, which is why I think these next 17 weeks will probably be the end of this Prime Minister. We will see. Sorry, I'm going on a bit long there. Kitty Donaldson from the iPaper.
Thank you very much, Kitty Donaldson from the iPaper. I'm just wondering, yesterday when the Prime Minister stood up in Paris, you accused him of attention-seeking, effectively. Do you think, is it just this conflict that you wouldn't put boots on the ground for? Or are you naturally reluctant to deploy British troops if you became Prime Minister? And to Laila, in London, yes to sort of Bromley and places like that, probably Reform will win. But what about the centre of the donut? Do you really think Reform can win that from Labour?
I think we can win in London. I think that Laila can become the Mayor of London because of what I just spoke about a minute ago. The fragment and leaking back to the question that Camilla asked. Frankly, the percentages needed to win are getting much, much lower when there are 5 or 6 parties playing serious roles in elections. So we'll have to see. Look, I'm not a pacifist, far from it. I think there are times when we should and we do need to use our military. But I was vehemently opposed to the Iraq war, going back over 20 years ago, deeply sceptical in many ways about Afghanistan, because I could in neither case see what the exit strategy was. And that is the problem. And it's why I said earlier, when I was asked indirectly, a slightly different question to you, but it's why I answered earlier that what Keir Starmer's just committed us to is a modern-day British Army of the Rhine, and remember we were there for half a century, more. He's committed us to a new BAOR without the facilities to do it, and without any idea of how long it would last. So I do not think this is a good idea. Now, if it was part of some, if lots and lots of countries were involved, great. But the Germans aren't going to send anybody. Giorgia Meloni was having a cigarette outside, and the Americans are saying, jolly good chaps, off you go. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Although I do hope a peace deal comes at some point before too long.
I'll just answer, sorry.
Go on.
In terms of winning in the inner donut, I'm from the inner donut. My friends are from the inner donut. Honestly, I say this honestly, it is not about Labour or Conservatives anymore. It is, what are you voting for when you vote for Labour in London? What exactly are you voting for? What have Labour done for the country and what have they done for London? And it's the same with the Conservatives. So I think it's not about party allegiance. It really is about, I don't want to feel that my son's going to get stabbed when he walks down the street. I don't want my son to be mugged. I don't want my daughter to be harassed on the tube. I want to see visible policing. I go to my local Sainsbury's. He tells me every half an hour he's shoplifted by the same guy. People walk in, just take stuff out. Shoplifting's a form of shopping in London. So you either want more of that, right? By all means, vote for Khan. Or you want something different. You want a thriving high street. You want shops open where they don't have 2 security guards. You have small little shops who have 2 massive security guards that you're going into like Fabric or like Ministry of Sound, like a club. No one wants that. You've got supermarkets that have got casing around chocolate or things like that. That's not the London I grew up in. The social fabric has been broken, and that is not by accident. That is Labour's London because they have deprioritised public safety. He has actively deprioritised it, and they've deprioritised all of us because their priorities don't match Londoners anymore. And so when people vote, I don't think they're going to be thinking about Labour or Conservatives. I think they're going to be voting on the safety of their children, their family, themselves, and what their high street looks like.
Yeah, and mayoral campaigns, whilst Laila's going to stand for Reform UK, in the end, personalities can become much bigger than the party label. I think Ken Livingstone proved that. Ken proved that when he got elected the second time without the Labour label. He was the person people wanted at that time. And I think Labour's personality, strength of character and passion is going to be... I think Khan is facing a much bigger challenge than he's faced at any time over the course of the last few years, and we will back her up all the way, as will, I believe, significant donors too. Nick Candy said here. Sounds like he's putting more money in, doesn't it? No, he's already put $1 million in. Natasha Clark from LBC.
Thanks, Mr. Farage. You said earlier you would not agree with the US if they do use military action in Greenland. If you do speak to Donald Trump, which I'm sure you will at some point, what would you say to persuade him not to do so? Because a lot of people are very worried about this. And on pubs, you obviously say that you want to save them. What would you like to do so? Would you like a VAT cut, business rates cut? And Laila, you've talked a lot about what you want to do in London. Nearly half of Reform's councils have already confirmed they will be raising council tax. Would you like to promise today that you would like to freeze council tax if you get elected in London? Thank you.
I think we give Laila just a couple of weeks to settle in before we push her on Croydon Council, for example, which has clearly been a total catastrophe, probably the worst in the whole country. So just give us a little bit more time on that, if you will. Obviously, the business rate re-evaluation is a massive problem. I would also remind you that energy prices are a disaster for old, drafty buildings, which many, many pubs are, and that both of the parties in government have pursued very high energy policies. It has had a huge direct effect on pubs. Also worth noting that George Osborne did put up beer taxes way, way, way above the rate of inflation. And Rachel Reeves, of course, said that she was cutting a penny off a pint. Do you remember, in that budget? Which I said would save me £1 a week. She didn't laugh. But then she's not very good at arithmetic, I suppose. Despite being a trained economist from the Bank of England for 10 years. Look, there are many things, but clearly the business rate thing is the absolute urgent priority, but I would add to that energy bills as well. In fact, everything this government has done is hit pubs. You know, minimum wage. Many people get their first job working behind the bar at 18, you know, or 17, whatever it is. And you've seen very big percentage increases, not just in the minimum wage, but of course the reduction to £5,000 a year, above which people have to start paying as employers national insurance. And a lot of young people aged 18 work in pubs for a few hours a week, or work on a busy Friday night, or work at the weekends. And they, for the employers, have been dragged in too. So every single thing this government has done, and many things the previous one have done, have hammered the pubs. But short term, the really immediate thing that could be done is to rethink this re-evaluation to pre-pandemic levels of business rates. Dan Bloom from Politico.
Thank you. To Nigel, are there any conceivable circumstances in which you would support putting boots on the ground in Ukraine? So, for example, you know, if the army was bigger, if other countries were involved. And to Laila, Politico interviewed Donald Trump not long ago. He said that Sadiq Khan gets elected because so many people have come in to the country. They vote for him now. Do you think that that's true?
I don't know. I don't even know how he gets elected. I've not met one person who's told me, hell yeah, I love Khan. I honestly don't know how he wins. I don't know if any of you have ever met someone who says, hell yeah, I love Khan. Somehow he makes it through, but I'll say this, he's never really had a proper opponent, right, who means business. I'm in it to win it, and as I said, London's my home, my love. It's where I've made my whole life, and it breaks my heart to see how it is. And I will be reaching out to all communities and understanding exactly what they want, and that's what I'll present. It won't be a manifesto for me, and it won't be a London for my own personal benefit. It will be a London that works for Londoners.
There were many that said that mass migration, and remember, we didn't have mass migration ever in the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, until Blair. We never had mass migration. We had net migration of about 30,000 a year for the whole of that period. And then Blair opened the doors. I mean, not as much as Boris, obviously, no one could do that, but Blair opened the doors. And the cynics said, He's importing loads of immigrants into Britain who will all then get the vote and all vote Labour. Well, if that was their policy, it's now turning against them very, very sharply, with one particular community now voting, one element of a particular community, be careful what I say, now voting along religious lines against the Labour Party. And it cost the Labour Party a handful of seats at the last election, and it will cost them between 30 and 50 seats at the next election. If you think back to operations like Korea, a long time ago, I know, but where many nations get together and all agree to do their bit, and to do so often in rotation, if that was the plan, if the coalition of the willing actually existed outside the Elysee in number 10, then this might be a feasible argument to make. But the coalition of the willing is Macron, who's very much on his way out anyway, and Starmer. So would I be prepared to be part of an international peacekeeping force? Yes. But our own engagement with it would be time restricted and on rotation, and then you might think seriously about saying yes. But in these circumstances, no, I don't believe this has been properly thought through. Anna Gross from the FT. We are getting there, folks.
Thank you very much. Anna Gross from the FT. Some people say that you're being selective and misleading in the data and anecdotes that you're using about crime in London. London's murder rate is the lowest in decades. It's much lower than Chicago, New York, and LA. Knife crime has fallen sharply over the past 10 years. The proportion of adults who have been victims of personal crime has fallen to the lowest level since 2002. Do both of you admit that across lots of really important metrics, London has actually become a much safer city?
This is, hang on, just do the national stuff first, if I may. This goes back to our campaign in August, where the great and the good, the Fraser Nelsons of this world, tell us that crime is falling, that Britain's the safest, happiest it's ever been. And that's because there are two different sets of data. There is the Crime Survey of England and Wales, which is the old-fashioned way of doing it. And it's where you put a letter through a letterbox and people fill it in and send it back by post. You know, people my age and older do that sort of thing. The vast majority of the population just chuck it in the bin. And that's why the Crime Survey of England and Wales, along with measures like BARB for radio viewership, etc., are now just completely out of date and don't work. If you actually look at police crime statistics, you will see not only a massive expansion in crime of all kinds, but what you'll also not get is the mass under-reporting of crime. And I can think of instances personally within my own family in the last few years where we've been subject to crime, we haven't even bothered to report it. So I just think this interpretation is wrong.
Nigel said it for me. We're going on police recorded data, and that is just the incidents that are recorded. I mean, I was a senior Crown prosecutor in London. I can assure you crime is not down. Crime is up. I don't know where you get that knife crime's the lowest. It's up by 68% since 2016, and that is police recorded data. And they assume a lot is not even recorded because it's to do with youth, and they don't record it. They assume that over 500,000 of rapes are not recorded. I've spoken to 2 victims in the past 2 months who've been raped, and the police have not bothered to charge it because somehow there's not enough evidence. They're so distraught. And I think it's a dangerous narrative to push that London is safe, because it's very disrespectful to victims. It's very disrespectful to people like me, to parents who've experienced it. I grew up in this town. I never had to experience that. From the age of 10, I was on the tube by myself, going from Brixton to Newham to Crystal Palace. My parents never worried the way I worry about my kids, and there were no phones then. So I don't know what that data means, but it's not what people feel on the streets.
It's now 11:20, so could I just say, I've got Genevieve, Ellie, David, Amelia, Alexandra, Alexander and Robert. Are any of you rushing off to PMQs? Then ask away, please. See how considerate I am?
Well, there you are. Very grateful. Rob Hutton from The Critic. Nigel, you've in the last 18 months taken about £13,000 from X, the social media site.
Yeah.
And its new innovation for 2026 is pornification, child porn on demand, that kind of thing. I was just wondering, is Reform MPs, are you going to carry on taking the child porn money? Or?
Well, point one, it's cost me a lot more than 13,000. The sheer nonsense of the way MPs' declarations work. You know, it's not designed for anybody that's got a company with employees or expenses. So I have to declare my gross income, including where it's relevant VAT, and I'm not allowed to offset against that any of my costs. And if you've been in business, you'll understand what I'm saying.
That's really my point.
I know, but I thought I'd have a bit of fun with you to begin with. Look, you know, he pays us, X pay us to do it. As I say, it cost me a lot more than that. It's cost me several times that in salaries and staff to produce what I do. No, I'm worried about this aspect of X. Very worried about this aspect of X. And Sarah will be leading the charge for us on this and urging that the government pushes very hard to put pressure on X to remove that facility. And I think he'll listen. I think he'll have to. Okay, right. You're running off to PMQs. I've got a handful more questions. We do give you, well, in fact, it was, I think Nick Eardley, the first question, said he was going to get value for money. I hope you all feel you're getting value for money. Geneviève Hull-Allen from the Daily Telegraph.
First of all, to Laila, you mentioned automating transport in London if you continue to struggle with unions and striking on the transport network. So are you saying that you would look to automate the tube network if you continue to battle against striking transport staff? And also, slightly more on your ULEZ plans, would you look to scrap the entirety of ULEZ, including in inner London, and would you do that on day one? And more broadly, perhaps for Nigel, there are clean air zones in areas, different cities and towns across the UK. Are you looking to get rid of all of those? Thank you.
Well, we're talking about the London elections, aren't we? And we're talking about, and in fact, many of the areas that we are contesting very hotly have been seriously affected by outer ULEZ. I mentioned the Bexleys, Bromleys, but I could have gone to the Haverings, Hillingdons, Suttons, Croydons, all sorts of other boroughs too. It has been a very real issue, and it struck that note of complete unfairness, that those with money and smart cars don't pay it, those that are poor do. So something absolutely monstrous. On the driverless thing, look, and I would point out to you that the Docklands Light Railway has been there for 30 years. And as far as I remember, they are driverless. And I can't remember any single serious accident or incident that's occurred.
I would definitely automate the trains. I'm sick and tired of London being held ransom by TfL union bosses. I think the last strike, they wanted tickets to Legoland as part of their deal. What the hell? I mean, they take us for granted, and that's because it's a Labour-run city, and Labour are in the pockets of the unions. So they have to respond. No, I would love to automate the tube, because every time there's a strike, London loses hundreds of millions of pounds. And you can't even drive in because you've got ULEZ and you've got congestion and you've got extortionate parking charges. In terms of ULEZ, my instinct now is to scrap it all, because I don't feel congestion's gone down in central London. If anything, it's worse. And I don't believe that punishing motorists or drivers is the way for a prosperous city.
And 20 miles per hour on the embankment at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, we're digressing. We're going to get through these last questions. Ellie Wheatley from Guido Fawkes.
Should the Met Police be restructured or even replaced with a new force, or is it just about reassigning officers? And Nigel, would you actually reverse Labour's cuts to the alcohol limit on driving?
Okay. Look, I think I'm going to refer very quickly to my friend Rudy Giuliani. He didn't abolish the NYPD. He changed its leadership. He put those into positions of authority that shared his vision of the broken windows theory, of dealing with crime from the bottom up, which, by the way, would include shoplifters. Every single shoplifter, however minor, under us would receive a prosecution. That's what you have to do. So I would suggest that rather than scrapping it, we need to find the right people in the right positions to help us deal with our agenda. And as for will I revert, look, you know, by the time the next election comes, we're going to have 1,001 things to do. But I think I made it pretty clear that I will stand up and defend rural pubs. OK, let's go to David Lynch from the Press Association.
Thank you for running back with the microphone. Hello, Mr. Farage, David Lynch from PA. First thing from me, there's been some reported overnight that US officials have described the UK as weak because we didn't sufficiently celebrate the capture of Maduro. Do you agree with the assessment of your friends across the pond? And secondly, you've talked today about the fact you're going to launch a Reform UK leader in Scotland. You've launched your mayoral candidate for London, which is an election in, I think, 2 years' time. What about Wales? Where's your leader for Wales? Why haven't you chosen one there yet?
I think you might be missing the ball here. Every single London voter is voting on May the 7th this year. We review it as the opening salvo of the campaign to win the Mayor of London against Khan in 2 years' time. And if you don't see that, I'm very sorry for you, because that's exactly how the public out there are going to see it. And I have no doubt about that. As for the American administration's view of this government, I would have thought the word weak on a number of subjects was probably something of an understatement. And yes, Scotland, I will be up next week, and Wales will come to you before the end of this month. Okay, so it is a work in progress. But, well, one has to be before. I can't do it simultaneously, can I? I don't know. Listen, when you're running a political party, you tell me how it works, and I'll learn from you. But we're getting a long way very, very quickly. Amelia Cook from The Independent.
Thank you. Millie Cook from The Independent. Immigration lawyers have warned that your plan to revoke indefinite leave to remain retrospectively would undermine the rule of law in Britain. Are you happy to press ahead with a policy that would unpick a cornerstone of British law?
I don't see ILR as being a cornerstone of British law anyway.
The retrospective element of ILR specifically.
Well, the retrospective element would depend if people who were here were either contributing to society and on the road to citizenship, yeah, because it's kind of a halfway house in between. And if people are doing that and are on that road, we're not going to have a problem. But if people are abusing the system under ILR, then I think we've got every right to say to them, look, this just can't go on forever. So I think actually what we're saying is pretty reasonable in every sense and would actually attract very widespread support. But look, you know, let's face it, you know, most of the legal community in Britain have been living on ECHR, Human Rights Act type laws. And so we are talking about a fundamental change of culture over decades. And that's going to come as a shock to many people in that world. OK, I've got just two more. Alexandra Topping from The Guardian.
Mr Farage, analysis suggests that Reform's policy on the two-child benefit cap would help less than 1% of those affected, putting almost 500,000 children back into poverty. When it comes to a vote, will Reform vote against lifting the two-child benefit cap in full? And for Ms Cunningham, London is considered to be one of the most diverse and successfully multicultural cities in the world. Do you think it's too diverse?
Do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, so of course it's the most diverse. My parents came here in the 60s from Egypt. It's not about diversity. What I find is, so when my parents came in the 60s, immigration was in the tens of thousands, and when it's so little, you have to integrate, right? Even if you don't want to, but my parents did. But what you found in certain parts of London is that immigration is too much, and when it's too many, they dominate. And you do have certain parts of London where people who were born in that area, grew up there, do not feel it's their part anymore. It doesn't feel like London. And that is a problem. But in terms of diversity, no, it's great, it's diverse, we're doing well, but we have to all operate under the umbrella that it is a British city and it's a British country. And people that come to London have to embrace British culture. You don't come to London expecting London to change for you. And I find that some people come, expect it to change for them, and when it doesn't change for them, they say we're racist. There's absolutely nothing racist about that. It's called patriotism. And if you come here, you've got to be on board with that.
No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. On the two-child cap, look, I regret that my comments have been so willfully misinterpreted. I tried to say something that was pro-family, which I know hasn't been heard from any party in decades. I was trying to be pro-family, pro-children, pro-working people who find it very, very hard to pay for childcare. It's a disincentive for them to have children and to go to work at the same time. So look, I think the way this government is doing it, well, looking at some of the stats, it's going to start to benefit huge numbers of foreign-born people. And that goes back to this point. We have to prioritise British-born people, whether it's for child benefit or whether it's for social housing. And so I think when it comes, we will vote against it. Last question, Alexander Brown from the Mirror.
Your Hampshire and Solent candidate, Chris Parry, said that David Lammy must go home to the Caribbean, praised Enoch Powell, questioned the loyalty of ethnic minority politicians, described Birmingham as a failed colony, and suggested that converts to Christianity should be forced to eat bacon to prove their sincerity. Is he a good representative of your party?
He also criticised quite strongly many white politicians, called them unpatriotic and suggested they went to live in other countries. Look, some of his comments are a bit rich. I get that. He is intensely patriotic. He's risen to the rank of Rear Admiral. He's given enormous service to this country. But I do think his comments on Lammy were over the top and he should apologise for them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.